No one believed a massive wild boar herd existed until the cameras captured this. After the major success of last week's wild boar roundup, the feral pigs around my farm were finally under control. It felt like I could finally take a break until I got a phone call. At my uncle's farm, hundreds of kilometers away, they were facing the exact same problem, maybe even worse. Large groups of wild boars have been showing up, destroying crops, tearing up the land, and losing almost all fear of humans. The first trap was set along the edge of pine forest. This time, I used a net trap instead of a steel cage. With such a wide area and boars moving in large groups, this type of trap could capture several at once without making them as suspicious as enclosed cages would. After spreading bait around the area, we quickly backed away and watched from a distance. We didn't have to wait long. By late afternoon, the wild boars began to appear. One by one, they moved toward the bait site. One by one, they stepped inside without the slightest suspicion. And by the time they realized something was wrong, the entire group was already trapped inside the net enclosure. The moment I moved closer, they went into a frenzy, desperately searching for a way out, but there was none. At the next location, we placed another trap out in an open field. This area was exposed with very little cover, so the boars were much more cautious and didn't appear as quickly as they had near the forest edge. We had no choice but to leave the trap overnight. The next morning, we came back to check it, and by then, several wild boars were already caught inside. As we approached the trap, the boars became frantic once again. They desperately tried to escape, but it was impossible. The net was strong, yet flexible, absorbing every impact and completely neutralizing their attacks against it. The next location was an open clearing in the western forest near the farm. This time, we used a steel cage trap, but the most interesting part was the mesh door at the front. At first glance, it looked simple, almost unremarkable. And that was exactly what made the wild boars lower their guard. Drawn in by the scent of food, they walked inside step by step without realizing anything was wrong. Only when they turned around did they discover that the entrance they had just walked through was no longer an exit. By midday, I returned to check the final net trap near the southern edge of the forest. I stopped for a few seconds, and then I realized something unexpected. Inside were not fully grown wild boars. Almost all of them were piglets. They crowded together, constantly moving, creating a chaotic scene, but somehow it felt completely different from the previous traps. Once the situation was under control, we began the hardest part, moving each wild boar from the trap into the truck bed. The tight space made them even more aggressive, constantly resisting as we pushed them in one direction. Every step had to be carefully calculated, keeping enough distance to stay safe while still applying enough pressure to force them forward. The crashing sounds, the pounding hooves, the chaos of them stumbling over one another, it made the entire situation more tense than ever. It took quite a while before we finally managed to load them all up and secure everything before leaving the area. After checking the final trap, I stood there for a while, looking across the surrounding area. Everything had slowly gone quiet again. The chaos from earlier was gone, but this time, the feeling was different. Not complete relief, because what I was looking at wasn't just captured wild boars. It was an entire cycle beginning again. The adults could be controlled, but the young ones were only the beginning. What would you do when facing over 200 pounds of muscle charging wildly through the darkness? For us, that's just another day on the job in Mississippi. With the support of infrared cameras and specialized net traps, we move in to eliminate the threat before crops are destroyed. Hop in and follow us in the hotspot right now. We are specialists in a rapid response wild hog control team in the Mississippi Delta. In this region, wild hogs are an ecological disaster. They tear up levees, destroy crops, and carry disease. Every day, my job starts with reading the signs. Freshly churned mud, deep hoof prints in damp soil, or scattered corn trails. That's how we map their movement. Our goal isn't blind eradication. It's safe wild boar trapping, minimizing the risk of accidents for both people and livestock. Two 20-foot pig brig net trap systems are already in place. The moment the hogs sense human presence, panic erupts inside the trap. They slam violently into the net walls, trampling over each other in a desperate attempt to escape. Dust explodes into the air, mixing with sharp, piercing squeals. But the net flexes, absorbing every impact and keeping them contained. To achieve this, we had been calculating and preparing for days. This system demands absolute patience. On Thursday night, we set the trap in conditioning mode. The net was suspended high on 6-foot steel T-posts, with dozens of pounds of corn spread evenly below. The hogs fed freely without feeling threatened. A few days later, we switched to capture mode. The net was lowered. Everything was ready, but wild hogs are not easy to fool. Camera data came in just after 1 a.m. Tension built in my chest as I watched the herd circle the trap on my phone screen. They were smarter than expected. The entire group stayed outside, using their snouts to eat the bait around the edges. Not a single one stepped fully under the hanging net. That was the real test. If we lost patience and intervened, we'd lose everything. Nearly an hour later, the lead sow finally gave in to hunger. She lifted the edge of the net with her snout and slipped inside. The rest followed immediately. Success. The next morning, as we approached, the entire group was in chaos. Mud splattered across the net, hooves sliding violently across the soaked ground until we began restraining them one by one. Around 11 p.m., the camera showed a large boar slowly approaching a circular cage trap with a netted entrance. It was extremely cautious, feeding only at the edge, its body not fully inside. Finally, it stepped fully inside. The 200-pound mass stood still for a moment, confused, chewing corn as if it hadn't yet realized it was trapped. That night, we headed out again to another trap site near a livestock farm. We arrived on site. A teammate pointed quietly to a torn section of net. Earlier, a hog had escaped through that exact spot. We had patched it, but the backup clips weren't strong enough. Wild hogs have excellent memory. If this one found that weak point again, it could escape. We weren't taking that risk. A single, decisive shot rang out. The threat was neutralized instantly. The next morning, we returned to clear the site. The hogs inside were still aggressive. Our muscles tensed as we tightened our grip on specialized catch poles. The looped snare tightened just enough to control each animal's resistance. Working in sync, we secured them one by one and loaded them efficiently onto the pickup truck. By early afternoon, the pickup stopped at the final trap site. The most destructive individuals in the area were here. Inside, they charged and slammed into the net in desperation. We continued processing them one by one. The job ended as the sun began to dip. Exhaustion set in, but the control operation was complete.
Go. Go, yeah. Hip, hip, get turned. Hip, hip, hip.
More than 150 pounds of rippling muscle, razor-sharp tusks, and a breeding speed far beyond control. We are slowly losing ground to wild boars if we keep relying on traditional trapping methods. As wildlife control managers in Texas, we bring a new control tool here. Soft, but impossible to break. But to capture an entire group of intelligent wild boars, old steel cages are no longer enough. We need a smarter strategy. A soft net trapping system called pig brig. The whole team moved immediately. Everyone had their role, working in perfect coordination. The heavy hammer strikes drove 7-foot steel stakes deep into the hard ground. The pig brig net was carefully suspended. Fermented corn bait was spread evenly from the outside toward the center. Sweat soaked through our protective clothing, but a perfect trap was finally ready. At a trap site near the forest edge, a large herd of boars had appeared. They were eagerly feeding on the fermented corn bait inside the net, completely unaware that they were already trapped. Outside, a few scout boars still stood back in the darkness, alert, watching, testing. They absolutely refused to step inside. The next morning, we drove to the site to inspect the overnight catch. Everything inside the trap became tense immediately. Every boar panicked and ran wildly the moment they saw human figures approaching. A full herd of wild boars of every size. Big ones, small ones. They charged continuously at the net walls. But it was useless. The pig brig net absorbed every impact. With no hard surface to push against, they quickly exhausted themselves, and everything was brought under control. The net trap had done its job perfectly, but the wild boars were still out there, and we could not allow ourselves to become careless. Noticing that the herd had started changing its travel route, I decided to establish a new trap point in an open grassy area between the forest and the farmland. During the first few days, we rolled the lower edge of the net upward. Bait was spread from the outside inward. This was the familiarization stage, allowing them to move freely in and out. When the camera reported back, an 80-pound scout boar stepped forward first. It sniffed around the net, carefully feeding outside the trap. The others stood farther away, watching. But eventually, the temptation of food won. Later, they finally pushed their snouts forward and slipped completely inside the net. The trap quietly closed without a single sound. Their survival instinct had been deceived by a design that felt too natural.